London.
5 minutes past 5, Shay here with you this afternoon until 6 p.m. on Radio London. Now, a housing association has apologised after a block of its residents received inaccurate service charge bills. The issues came to light after dozens of Notting Hill Genesis residents contacted BBC London to express concern about their spiralling costs and inaccuracies after we reported a previous error. Now, it's the second time the Housing Association has apologised after sending rent and service charge increase notices, including one charge for a non-existent lift. Our Work and Money correspondent Megan Owen reports.
Residents at this block of flats in Wembley have been paying for a lift for the last 2 years. The only thing is, it doesn't exist.
We just don't have a lift in this block. So we've asked for a refund, we've asked multiple times, but Notting Hill Genesis still haven't made that refund. So we're still paying for a lift that doesn't exist.
How much?
It's about £200 this year. Trying to get someone to listen to this and to actually get the refund, it's proving like banging my head against a brick wall.
2 hours after we filmed with the residents, they received an apology from Notting Hill Genesis, who told us certain costs have been incorrectly apportioned, meaning some of our residents have received inaccurate service charge bills. We'll be sending new estimates as well as issuing refunds where appropriate. We recognise the impact this will have had on residents and are sorry for the understandable concern caused. Angela is one of dozens of residents who contacted the BBC about soaring service charge costs, including this group who live in Notting Hill Genesis-owned flats in Hendon. Their costs are increasing by over 100%, the highest in over 20 years.
Me personally, I don't feel listened to at all.
Yeah. There's lots of phone calls, never reply to emails, anything.
Documents seen by the BBC show that a previous year's costs were under budgeted by over £77,000.
Why should I be penalised for someone's mistake over under budgeting a 22-year-old building?
How has it made you feel?
I'm physically and mentally drained. There we go.
Notting Hill Genesis says, we recognise the impact this has had on residents and are sorry for the understandable concern this is causing. This year's estimates now include a more appropriate level of costs, meaning charges will be more predictable in the future. Tenants from other housing associations across the country have been reporting similar price hikes and miscalculations.
We think that this is a scandal on a par with the post office scandal, because tenants and residents have been saying for years that this is happening, and the landlords and government have just refused to listen.
The government says they're consulting this year on implementing measures to drive up transparency of service charges, ensuring leaseholders and tenants can better hold their landlords to account.
BBC London's Megan Owen there with that report. And at the end, of course, you heard from Suzanne Mooner, the chair of the group's Social Housing Action Campaign. Suzanne joins me live on the line now. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. Firstly, we heard there from a couple of residents in homes owned by Notting Hill Genesis, but this is a much broader problem, isn't it?
It's a huge problem, and it's one of the biggest areas of campaigning at the moment for SHAC, because the sheer scale of overcharging that is going on by housing associations, it's really hard to describe just how much misery this is causing to ordinary people, ordinary families who are already struggling to budget because of other cost rises. But then, as was we heard in your piece, are then facing 100%, 200%, and even 400% in one case rises in their service charges. It's just not sustainable. And they are riddled with inaccuracies. These accounts are riddled with inaccuracies. The Notting Hill Genesis in one case is obviously claiming that this was an under-budgeting. They hadn't budgeted properly the previous year. But charging for a lift that doesn't exist is not a budgeting error, is it? That's not under-budgeting. That's just getting it wrong. And it's taken these tenants and residents all of this agitation and, getting the press involved before Notting Hill Genesis would take any notice.
Of course, there's going to be many Londoners completely shocked by what they're hearing today. But back in November, BBC London did a special day of programming just around issues associated with leaseholders and service charges. Since then, of course, we have had over 1,000 people get in touch with similar stories about service charges. I just wonder, Suzanne, from the campaign work you're doing, what needs to fundamentally change here?
Well, first of all, I think there needs to, landlords are just obviously not capable of putting their own house in order in that sense. They're just not getting it right, and they're not putting enough resource into making sure that they get it right. The legislation already exists that says that service charges should be accurate and have to be reasonable. But the big gap is in enforcement. And what we would like to see is a process similar to the deposit protection scheme for renters, whereby if there are disputed service charges, you can pay the disputed amount to the court, and it would only then get released to the landlord if the landlord can show that that charge is legitimate. So if you think about the case, at least one of the cases that has been highlighted, where there wasn't actually a lift but they were being charged for it, that would have been a very fair way to resolve that dispute, because the tenants would have paid it, but it wouldn't have gone into the landlord's pocket, and they wouldn't have this big battle afterwards to try and get the money back from the landlord, because the court would be in charge of it instead.
If you can just talk to me here just around this timeline of change. The government, as you mentioned, they do have a leasehold reform plan where they aim to remove leasehold as a tenure in its entirety. Will this actually happen? And is the timeline by 2029 realistic, do you think?
Well, we know that there's a huge amount of lobbying going on against, with government at the moment by landlords who don't want leaseholds to be reformed, at least for existing properties, existing leaseholders. So this, we are likely to see the timeline slipping, but it is still, going to leave a lot of people who are already in leaseholds. They are going to be left still with these landlords, ultimately these big landlords that are very, very difficult to deal with. And of course, if you're a renter who has had exactly these same problems with, because a lot of renters pay service charges an extra bill alongside their rent, then this isn't going to touch the problem for you. We are very sceptical about the likelihood of leasehold reform being delivered in a way that really makes a big change for the leaseholders who are suffering. And of course, they're suffering not just from service charges, but from other issues as well, like fire safety and cladding.
What would you say that people can be doing in difficult situations if they are concerned about the service charges that are being billed with at the moment?
Well, what we can do is where people aren't able to pay or aren't willing to pay when they know that there's...
Unfortunately, it doesn't.
Sometimes they've...
Apologies, Suzanne, your line cut out. Sorry to interject there, but do you mind starting that again? Because it's vitally important, and it's not your fault. I think there was an issue with the line. But if you could just re-elaborate what you were talking about there as to what people can do with these difficult situations.
Yeah, so it's that the charges are wrong, and they've tried already to get the landlord to address it, and the landlord just isn't engaging with them. Payment. We give advice on how to do that safely. We already have hundreds of tenants and residents up and down the country who are already doing that. So that's one way they can do it. They should contact their local MP and their local councillors and ask them to intervene. They should continue trying to engage with the landlord. But really, we need everybody working together and really holding these landlords to account. So, we do organise protests and things like that where we really feel that there's this kind of injustice going on, because we really need to get the landlords.
I'm going to leave it there, Suzanne, just because unfortunately your line has cut out a number of times. But just to kind of reiterate that point you were making, and thank you again for joining me, Suzanne Mooner there, chair of the group's Social Housing Action Campaign. She's just mentioned that you can get in touch with them. I will give you the website details. It's shaction.org, shaction.org, so Social Housing Action Campaign, and the website again, shaction.org. Now, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government have said we will consult this year on implementing measures to drive up transparency of service charges, ensuring leaseholders and tenants can better hold their landlords to account. If this is something that's affecting you, of course, we've been reporting about this extensively. Can you get in touch with the station, with the show, 0800 731 2000, share your concerns, what your situation is currently with regards to your tenancy, perhaps the service charges that you are receiving and the notices that you are currently getting. You can email as well on shay@bbc.co.uk. So that's shay@bbc.co.uk. Now, you can also, as a reminder, watch the actual documentary, BBC London's documentary, The Leasehold Trap. It covers issues relating to service charges and is available to watch on iPlayer right now.